Before the soldiers came, my world smelled sweet like apples. I was just a boy then, living in a small village tucked away in a valley in France. My name is Jean-Pierre, and our farm was my whole world. I remember waking up to the sound of the rooster crowing, his voice echoing across the misty fields. My father would already be outside, his strong hands checking the apple trees. He used to say that apples had their own language, and if you listened closely, they would tell you when they were ready. My mother's kitchen was always warm, a cozy place with comforting smells like baking bread and simmering stews. Life was simple, but it was ours. My days were spent chasing chickens, helping my father trim the apple trees, kicking a worn-out leather ball with my friends in the village square. We didn't have much, but we had everything that mattered. We had our families, our homes, and the freedom to run through the fields until the sun went down behind the mountains. In the evenings, my grandfather would tell me stories. He spoke of old kings, brave knights, but he also spoke of the Great War, his voice getting quiet and sad. I didn't really understand his words then. War was just a story, something that happened in books, a far-off rumble that couldn't possibly reach our peaceful valley. Then, the whispers started. They came on the wind, carried by travelers and talked about in quiet voices at the market. Talk of a new war, of soldiers marching across borders, of a dark cloud spreading over Europe. My parents would stop talking whenever I came into the room, their faces showing a worry I had never seen before. The radio, which once played happy music, now buzzed with serious voices talking about faraway cities and battles. The smell of apples was still there, but now it was mixed with something else, something bitter and cold, the smell of fear. The night it all changed started with a storm. Rain hit our little farmhouse hard. Inside, we huddled close to the fire. The flickering flames made long, dancing shadows on the walls. My mother was fixing a tear in my pants. Her needle moved back and forth with a quiet rhythm. My father stared into the fire, his mind far away. But that night, the war was about to knock on our door. It was a sharp, urgent knock, loud enough to cut through the storm. We all froze. No one visited this late. My father put a finger to his lips, eyes wide with alarm. He crept to the window, peeking through a small gap in the curtains. My heart beat fast against my ribs, a wild drum in the sudden quiet. On the doorstep, wet and shaking, stood a man. He was a stranger. My father recognized the look. Someone running for their life. He was a pilot, an Englishman. His plane had been shot down over the nearby hills. My father, a man who'd only known how to work the land, made a decision right then. It was a choice that could cost us everything. He opened the door. The pilot stumbled inside, leaning on my father for support. He was young, not much older than a boy, mud on his face, a deep cut on his forehead. My mother gasped, then rushed for a bowl of warm water and clean cloths. He spoke little French. We spoke no English. In that moment, language didn't matter. We understood his fear. He understood our kindness. We were breaking the occupiers' strictest rule, helping the enemy. That night, the pilot slept restlessly in my small bed. I lay awake on a makeshift bed by the fire. I listened to the storm. I listened to the quiet, worried whispers of my parents. They spoke of the resistance, secret groups that helped people like the pilot escape. My father said we had no choice. It was our duty as human beings. The pilot, whose name we learned was Arthur, stayed hidden in our barn for 3 days. My job was to bring him food and water, a secret mission that made my stomach churn with both fear and a strange feeling of importance. I would fill a basket with bread, cheese, and a bottle of milk, covering it with hay as if I were just going to feed the animals. Arthur was kind. He had a gentle smile, even though his eyes were full of worry. He showed me a crumpled photo of his family back in England, a woman and a small girl with bright, laughing eyes. It was my father who got in touch with the resistance. He went to the village, pretending to trade for some rare supplies, but his real reason was to speak to Monsieur Dubois, the baker. The baker was a man of few words, known more for his good bread than for talking. But behind his flour-dusted apron, he was a key part of the secret chain that helped people escape. My father came back late that evening, his face serious but determined. A plan had been made. It was risky, very risky, but it was Arthur's only chance. The plan involved me. My heart jumped into my throat when my father explained it. I was to guide Arthur through the woods to the baker's shop in the next village, a journey of several miles. We would have to travel at night. Because I was just a boy, my presence would look less suspicious if we were stopped. They will see a boy out for a walk, not a guide, my father whispered, though his hand trembled as he rested it on my shoulder. I was terrified. The woods I knew so well in the daytime turned into a dark, scary maze at night. filled with strange sounds and deep shadows. But then I thought of Arthur's daughter in the photo, and I knew I had to do it. My mother prepared a small bag for me, with a piece of bread and a precious apple from the last of our private store. She hugged me tightly, her hug lasting longer than usual. "Be brave, my Jean-Pierre," she whispered, her voice full of feeling. Bravery, I was beginning to learn, wasn't about not being scared. It was about being terrified and doing what needed to be done anyway. As darkness fell, I met Arthur at the edge of the woods, my small lantern making a weak flickering light. The journey had begun. The journey through the woods was the longest night of my life. Every rustle of leaves sounded like the footsteps of soldiers, and every hoot of an owl made my heart jump. Arthur, even with his injuries, moved with quiet determination, his hand resting lightly on my shoulder for guidance. We followed the winding path I knew from my childhood adventures, a path that was not on any map. We reached the edge of the next village just as the first hint of dawn was starting to paint the eastern sky in shades of grey and pink. The streets were empty, silent except for the far-off crow of a rooster. We crept through the alleys, staying in the shadows until we reached the back of the bakery. A faint light glowed from a small window, and the comforting smell of baking bread filled the air. I gave a specific soft knock on the back door, 3 quick taps, then 2 more. For a moment there was only silence, and a wave of panic washed over me. Then the lock slid back with a soft click and the door opened a crack. Monsieur Dubois, the baker, peeked out, his eyes looking around the alley before he quickly brought us inside. The warmth of the bakery surrounded us. He led us past the huge brick oven, the sacks of flour, to a small storage room at the back. He moved a stack of empty flour sacks against the wall, showing a part of the wooden floor that looked just like the rest. When he knelt and pressed a certain spot, a hidden trap door swung open, showing a dark, narrow space under the floorboards. It was a secret hiding spot just big enough for one person to hide. My time with Arthur was over. He turned to me, his face full of thanks. He couldn't say much in French, but his eyes said it all. He placed his hand on my head and said, "Thank you, brave boy." Then he handed me a small silver button from his uniform jacket. "For you," he whispered. I held it tightly in my hand as he lowered himself into the hiding place. Monsieur Dubois closed the trapdoor, and just like that, Arthur was gone. The baker simply nodded at me and pointed me toward a fresh loaf of bread he had set aside. My mission was complete. My journey home was a blur. I was very tired. I was very relieved. With the sun now rising, the woods no longer seemed so scary. I held the silver button in my pocket. It felt like a medal, a secret award for a secret act of bravery. I finally saw our farmhouse, smoke gently coming from the chimney. I started to run. My mother and father were waiting at the door. Their faces showed fear. Their faces showed hope. They saw me, alone and safe. Their relief was overwhelming. My mother hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. My father's eyes shone with pride. Life went back to being somewhat normal. Everything felt different. The world was the same, but I was not. But I now carried a secret. I knew that under the surface of our quiet lives, a silent fight was happening. I looked at Monsieur Dubois differently when we saw him in the village. This normal man, covered in flour. He was a hero. He risked his life every day. His bakery was a secret stop on the long road to freedom. I learned heroes weren't just knights in shining armor from my grandfather's stories. Bakers, farmers, everyday people who chose to do the right thing. Days turned into weeks. We heard nothing more about Arthur. We didn't expect to. In the world of the resistance, silence often meant success. Not knowing was a heavy feeling we all carried. Had he made it? Was he safe? Every time a military truck rumbled through the village, my heart would stop. One evening, months later, a secret message was broadcast over the hidden radio channel. The line, "The lark has learned to sing again." It was the signal. It meant a group of airmen had been moved along the line to safety. We couldn't know for sure if Arthur was among them. We allowed ourselves to believe he was. We imagined him returning to his family, showing them a photo of a small French village, telling them about the people who had helped him. In our hearts, we knew he was safe. When the war finally ended, and the bells of our village church rang out for freedom, the sound was the sweetest music I had ever heard. People poured into the streets, laughing and crying and hugging each other. The world was slowly getting better, scarred but not broken. The memory of the war would never go away, but neither would the memory of the goodness that had shined through the darkness. The escape over the mountains, the secret routes to Spain, the secret routes to Switzerland, was proof of the quiet, stubborn bravery of countless ordinary people who refused to let the darkness win. Years have passed since that dark time. I am an old man now, and my hair is as white as the snow on the mountains Arthur may have crossed. I still live on the farm, My grandchildren now run through the same apple orchards where I once played. I tell them stories, just as my grandfather told me. I tell them about the war, not to scare them, but to teach them. I tell them about the fear and the hardship, but more importantly, about the courage and the kindness. History is not just about dates and battles. It is about people and the choices they make. Bravery has many faces. The soldier on the battlefield, the mother who shares her last piece of bread, the baker who risks his life for a stranger, the father who opens his door on a stormy night, the young boy who overcomes his fear to lead someone to safety. Bravery is not about not being afraid. It is the decision that something else is more important than fear. A quiet, steady flame can burn brightly, even in the deepest darkness. Sometimes, I take out the small silver button Arthur gave me. It is smooth from years of being held. A single act of kindness can spread outwards, creating waves of hope that travel for miles, across borders and over mountains. In times of great trouble and darkness, when it feels like all the light has gone out, we must look for the helpers. Small brave acts of kindness, caring, and courage. This is what it means to be human. It is how we keep the light alive. So even after the longest, darkest night, a new day will always begin.